Hey everybody, and welcome back to Careers in a Crunch. I'm Artie, and today I'm joined by Laura Bauer, and I'm super excited to have her on my podcast and hear about her professional journey. So I want to take a second to thank you again for being here.
Of course.
All
I'm
right,
happy to be here.
so I guess we can just get started with a few questions.
Sure.
Um, all right, so my first question is, what did you major in, and how did that have an impact on your career, if it did at all?
Okay. Well, I went to the University of Richmond in Virginia, and I majored in communications and leadership. And leadership at the time was a new major that was being offered. And I thought it sounded so compelling. I had never really heard of that program before. I had always been interested in writing, and so I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I got into college, but I always knew that I gravitated towards writing and the written word, and communications seemed like a good field to go into. So I decided to major in that. And then when I heard about that leadership major, I was super excited because I had never, again, it was unique and something different. And so I did a dual major and I loved it. I loved all my classes, and I thought it was a really good fit. For me, I actually didn't know still as I was going through college what I wanted to do, but I think it gave me a great background. The communications classes that I took, I eventually got into the PR, but I think it gave me a great background in terms of some of the skill sets you need as a writer as well. A lot of it is being able to communicate and sort of sell yourself. You have to do a lot of self promotion when you're a writer. So I think that gave me a great skill set combined with those leadership skills as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's so cool how I guess at first it wasn't something that was like, or it's like a more first time thing that was offered. So I think that's really cool. And I think that's really cool how you kind of said it kind of led you to where you are. Um, and how it was a great fit. I think that's great and that's so cool.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I got
yeah,
really lucky that I liked it. You know, you never know when you're entering college. Sometimes people have a strong track and they know what they want to do, but I was not one of them.
yeah.
And so I think I got really lucky that the majors that I picked, I ended up really liking and have used and utilized in my career.
Yeah, that's great. And like you said, you spent a while working in public relations. So
Yep.
did you know that I guess that wasn't kind of your final kind of career? Um, or did kind of being an author and kind of working in like writing happen unexpectedly?
That's a great question. I had no idea that writing children's books was even like a potential career for me. So I didn't really start thinking about it until I had my first kid, Avery. And so I read her a ton of picture books. And as I was reading them, I sort of fell in love with the craft and wanted to learn more and more about it. And so I started to get books. I was still a little bit early because I had my next two kids, 2 years apart from each other. So I had three kids total. So I didn't get a lot of work done on that on like a new career path at that time. So it did take a long time, but it was when I had Avery and I started reading a lot of picture books that I really started to think about it seriously. I had always, when I was growing up, I loved reading. I loved picture books. I loved going to the library. It's my favorite place. But to be honest, I did not know that that was a potential career that I could go after. So I actually think this podcast is really awesome that you're doing it because I think kids will learn about, all different job paths and careers and maybe start thinking about things in a new way. So
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I think it's so cool how you kind of said that your favorite place was the library and how you were always growing up, around like words and books and pictures and things like that. So I think it's cool how you becoming an author kind of, I guess, goes hand in hand with when you were a little kid and kind of the hobbies that you had. Um, and also how you said that you read a lot of kind of picture books to Avery. So I think that's also really cool.
Yeah, it was it was actually, just get stacks and stacks out of the library. And she was probably like less than a year old, but I would just remember sitting on, the bed and just reading it over and over to her. So that's when my love started. And I don't know about her love of picture books, but my love started there with
Y-
her. So it
Yeah.
was really like a special time.
Yeah, that's great. Um, and you also teach preschool.
Yep.
So how has like kind of spending every day around little children, I guess, kind of changed the way you think about storytelling or like inspired your storytelling?
Yeah, I get so many ideas from my kids. I teach in the twos. And so the things that they say and the things they come up with and what's, going through their minds, it just gives me so many nuggets of ideas. And a lot of times I will have like a little piece of paper and I'll just jot down something that one of the kids said that's really funny. And then that definitely inspires me with future books. One of the books I have right now that's currently it's called On Submission when an agent is sending it out to editors, is about crocodiles. And I had a little boy in my class that was absolutely obsessed with all things reptiles. He loved crocodiles and alligators. And so he definitely inspired me to write that manuscript. So I really do get so many gems. And I love being a teacher and hearing all the things that they say because it definitely inspires me.
Yeah, I think that is so cool how I guess you, right, working with little kids and hearing what they say and seeing the way they kind of interact with each other and then kind of applying those kind of real life, I guess, kind of scenarios and conversations and personalities to your books. I think that is so cool. And I feel like children, when you think about like books for children, it's like picture books and things like that. A lot of times, especially like you were saying, the little kids. Um, and I think it's so cool how you kind of translate what you see in real life to your own stories and like the crocodile book, that's great.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But yeah, just go back to your other question. I really loved my PR job. I was working in the city for about 10 years at the same company. I got an internship there and I kind of worked my way up. And I loved it. It was super exciting and fast paced. But once I had Avery, I sort of started to rethink things because it was a demanding job. Even
Hmm.
though they were a great company and flexible, I just sort of felt like I wanted to be home. And so I shifted. And then once I was decided I was going to be home, I was kind of thinking, well, what could I do? And that's when I look back at what are some of the things I've loved over the course of my life. And, top of the line, writing, reading. I
Yeah.
kept journals for years. I have stacks of journals that I wrote in every day when I was growing up. And so I started to think more about careers and shifting gears. So it'd be something that I could do while I was home with Avery and my subsequent kids. So,
Yeah. I guess kind of going off of that, were there any like skills that you, I guess, learned or used in your PR job that kind of helped you out when I guess like being an author?
yeah, that's a great question. I think when I was writing, I did a lot of writing press releases for my clients. And so when you're writing press releases, you really want it to stand out and grab attention from the media. So I definitely had to incorporate hooks and things that were going to grab the attention of people that were reading it and make them, my job was to get them to, either buy a product or a service and see things in a new light. So you definitely needed attention, getting statements and words and phrases. And so I think that helps me a lot in writing because there's so much creativity that goes into writing picture books. It's every single word that you put in there counts. And I
Hmm.
sort of had that training when I was working in PR and doing, a lot of articles and press releases and the creative writing on that side definitely translated to how I think about words and how I think about what words would make sense together and would get the best impact.
Yeah, I think that's really cool because I think when I think about like public relations and like being an author, I feel like I think that they're just two very separate careers.
Yeah.
But I guess when you're talking about some of the skills that you're using, it's interesting to see how some of the things um, that you've, I guess, used in your PR job kind of helped you out when writing um, the picture books. Yeah.
Definitely. And then on the marketing and promotion side, that's a huge part of writing, which actually, when I was getting into it and first starting, I didn't really quite realize how much I would be responsible for the promotion end of things. And so that having that background in public relations and I think has been super helpful for me. Now it is very different when you're trying to promote yourself
Hmm.
versus something else, a product or service that's not tied to you. Um, it's definitely more challenging when you're doing it for yourself, but I do think I had that inherent skill set from working in that PR field
Hmm.
that I kind of am able to see, the best way to position myself and different connections and strategic opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and then kind of, I was wondering if you could like take us through like being an author and kind of what it's like when you, I guess, first have your idea to the finished book, kind of on the shelf of a bookstore and kind of what that process is like.
Sure. So that was another thing I did. I had no idea when I first started about how long it was going to take. So this business, you definitely need perseverance and dedication. I'll give you an example. The first book that I sold called The Imposter, I sold that in 2022. And I sold it to my publisher, and it came out in 2024. So actually, you know what? It was in 2021 I sold it, and then it came out in 2024. The book actually hit bookshelves in 2024. So almost 3 years later, the book came out. So I had no idea the process was going to be that long. So basically, my process for that book was I wrote the story, and then I have something called critique partners that I send the story to. And then they give me feedback and I edit it a lot. So a lot of writing picture books is editing and making sure, as we were talking about before, every word counts because picture books are really short.
Hmm.
And so they're typically less than 500 words. So you really have to make sure that your words are really adding and contributing to the manuscript. So it's a lot of editing. It's a lot of going back and forth with your critique partners. And I actually, part of my learning and trying to sort of figure out as much as I can about the writing industry, I started going to conferences, I started taking classes, and so I went to this conference in the city called it was the SCBWI, which stands for Society for Children's Books Writers and Illustrators. And so I went to that conference. I was kind of just starting out, but I decided that I really wanted to pursue this and it was a goal of mine. So I figured I'd try to learn as much as I could. So I went to the conference, which was super interesting. They had really great keynote speakers and it's a great networking opportunity. So I actually met a friend there, and then she introduced me to this woman who at the time was attending as a writer. But a couple years later, she formed her own publishing company, which is doing amazingly well, called Gnome Road Publishing. And so I had had that connection from the conference. And so when she formed her publishing company, this at the same time, I was working on my stories and editing them and getting them in good shape. So when I felt like I had a story that was in really good shape, I decided to send it to her. And then she actually bought the story. So I think that was a really great way of networking and sort of getting yourself out there. I remember being super nervous when I went to that first conference because I felt like I didn't belong. I definitely felt like an imposter. Like, what am I doing here? A lot of the people that I remember they went around and they said how many people in this audience are published authors, and over half the people in there raised their hands. And I was so far from that at the time. So it just totally amazed me, but it also inspired me because I was like, look at all these people that have been able to do this. So it was definitely overwhelming, but at the same time, it was a very inspiring experience. So I had sold my manuscript to Gnome Road in 2021, and then they matched me up with an illustrator. That's part of the picture book process. I do not do any of my illustrations, fortunately for everybody who's reading the book. That wouldn't come out that well. But yeah, I'm matched with an illustrator who was fabulous. Carissa Green, they paired me with for The Imposter. And the illustrations take a long time because you just send over the text and they have to interpret the text and bring their vision to it. So it's a very collaborative effort working with the illustrator. It's like a 50-50 partnership, which I really enjoyed. And so it was amazing having the art come back to me. At first, it comes back in sketches, and it's just these black and white drawings. And I was able to offer some feedback, which doesn't always happen. But I really had very minimal feedback because Carissa did such an amazing job, and it was even better than I had envisioned. So, but yeah, it's a long process. It's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of editing. It's a lot of critiquing. And the actual publication process takes a while because the publisher has their schedule lined up, so they have to fit you into a slot on where they think your book would best do, and in terms of timing for the other books they have coming out. So it's a bit of a puzzle.
Yeah, I didn't even think that. To me, I didn't realize how long the publishing portion of the,
Yeah,
I think, process was. And I think, yeah, the process, it's definitely, I think, a lot longer than I had imagined.
yeah.
Um, and of course, like, I think the writing itself is a difficult process, but I think I didn't realize, like you were saying, the publication really took um a couple of years. And I think it's really cool how you're talking about having an artist and like that kind of collaboration, because of course when you think picture books, it's kind of also like hand in hand, like the writing and like the pictures go together. And I think it's really cool how um you were kind of talking about how that process was when how you were paired with an artist. And I think it's just overall a really cool process. So yeah.
Yeah, I was really, I mean, just going through it the first time, I was really amazed at how it works and getting, obviously the behind the scenes look on
Hmm.
all the illustration process was amazing.
Yeah.
They bring so much to the picture books. It's like they take their vision too. And
Hmm.
that's why it just when it like melds really well, it creates, such a beautiful
Yeah.
book. So I've been really lucky to be matched up with great illustrators.
Yeah. And then I think kind of going off what you were saying when you were sitting in that conference room and you were, I guess, surprised at how many people were published. Were there any moments when you sort of questioned if um, kind of your dream of being a published author was going to come true, and if you had any kind of setbacks going through that process?
Yeah, there is a lot of rejection in this business, in this industry. So there's definitely been times that I have questioned myself saying, is this going to happen? Is this going to come to fruition? I knew I was
Hmm.
working hard. I knew I was putting in the effort, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of people out there that are working hard and putting in the effort, and a lot
Hmm.
of talent out there. So it was definitely discouraging at times. I would say I started writing seriously in 2016. And so, it took till 2021 to sell my first book. That might actually, the way some people look at it might not be, so long because I know it can take longer in
Hmm.
other situations. But to me, it felt super long because I was working, really hard on it, and a 5 year gap of getting results and
Yeah.
positive feedback was challenging. But I kept going. It's just I think when you have a love for it,
Yeah.
I knew I loved it. I knew that it brought me joy. When I have free time, I go to writing because it brings me joy. It's not something I feel like I have to do. It's something I want to do and like really appreciate the time I get to do it.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think it's just you got to keep going. You got to have the
Yeah.
tenacity. A lot of times, people give up because it's so hard.
Hmm.
And I'm part of this organization called 12 by 12, and they always say that if you give up, that's it. But if you keep going and keep like staying in the game, a lot of times it can be a numbers game, because you have to send out a lot of
Hmm.
stories, you have to send out a lot of pitches.
Yeah.
but you keep getting closer and closer to that yes. So
Yeah.
it's just all about, keep going, keep believing in yourself, keep doing the work.
Hmm.
I constantly continue to take classes and, further myself because there's so much to learn. It's
Yeah.
amazing how much, I listen to webinars all the time and I'm just like so inspired by, what they have to say. And then I start to think about things in a different way. And that really helps, elevate my manuscript. So it's just about, continuing on the process and believing in yourself.
Yeah. And I love the way you talk about like writing, like it, like you were saying, it's something that you get to do.
Yeah,
And I like the way that you kind of talk about how like when you have a passion for something, it's easier to kind of get through that process. And especially I think as an author, because it's such a long process before, it's published and you're selling your books and um, it definitely is something that takes a while. So I think kind of persevering, but while having that the joy for doing what you're doing is really great. And I think it's also so cool how you still take classes and webinars and join conferences because, like you were saying, you have a lot to learn. And I think that's important because I think you're never really fully at like the top. There's always something more that you can learn. So I think that's really cool.
absolutely. Yeah, there's always room to grow. So,
Yeah.
and I love it. I love I feel like I'm in school again. So I love taking classes and listening to the
Yeah.
webinars. Yeah.
And then going into advice, if you could go back and give your high school self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think a good piece of advice is to um, cast a wide net, try a lot of things.
Hmm.
I think sometimes, especially when you're in high school, I think you maybe think you have to have everything figured out. And that's not the case.
Hmm.
I mean, in my particular case, I sort of figured it out as I went, but I think that each opportunity that I did led to something else, and maybe not something that I would have initially thought. So I think being open, taking advantage of opportunities that present themselves to you,
Yeah.
not being afraid to say yes and not being afraid to try something new. I think that, those will all serve you really well.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, and something that a lot of high school students, I think, would benefit from hearing because I think it's so important to kind of be open to different opportunities because you never know where it might lead you. Right, one closed door might like lead to another open one. So I think it's like really great to kind of have that open mind. Um, and kind of I think like you were saying, like always like I guess like kind of be on the lookout and like um be aware of different opportunities and like you were saying, like cast a wide net because
Yeah.
it could bring a lot more than you expected.
Yep. Definitely.
And then going into my last question, what advice would you give to high school students who are still unsure about what they want to do?
I think this ties into what we were talking about. I think that it's okay. I think there's a lot of pressure these days to know exactly what you want to do. But I think that, when you're in high school, you're figuring things out, and even in college, you're figuring things out. So I think, give yourself a little grace, and we're talking about like explore things and be open to things and try new things. And this is the time to do it.
Hmm.
You don't necessarily have to pinpoint exactly
Yeah.
what it's going to be and, who you're going to be because
Hmm.
that is constantly evolving, right? And changing. So I think, yeah, just go easy on yourself. I know there's a lot of pressure. I see it
Yeah.
in terms of thinking you have to have everything figured out. But college is a chance to explore and
Hmm.
find out what you really love doing. So,
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think it should be okay to be unsure about what you want to do and what you want to be because I don't think life is ever going to be like a straight path, or maybe for some
right.
people it might be, but I
Yep.
think for the most part, a lot of people, there's a lot of like curves that people go through and a lot of different things that people experience before they figure out what really is kind of their passion and their joy. Yeah, and I think it's definitely, like you were saying, there's definitely the pressure to know um, kind of who you are going to be in the future.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, I think it should be people should be more like open-minded that and kind of like open to different opportunities and different careers. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
yeah. Thank you again for being here. This was great. I learned so much. Yeah, and this was truly amazing.
Thank you for having me. As I said, I think this is a great thing that you're doing. I think kids will really benefit from, hearing about the different careers there are. So kudos to you for
Thank
for
you.
starting this podcast, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day. Bye
Thanks, you
bye.
too. Bye.
That's it for this episode of Careers in a Crunch. If you found today's conversation helpful and informative, be sure to share with a friend or family member. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an interview. Thanks. Bye.